Now, did you know that when it comes to technical data, this is growing 2 times after every 2 years? And this is from the Orleans Marketing Group. So technical data is going to be data that that is basically going to be uh, data that is created as a result of anything from a log file, from basically a query, a search, whatever that data is. It's technical in the sense that we're going to try to derive value from it. As far as IT professionals, this is clearly a growing area as well. And then the next decade, we're looking at another 12% increase in IT related jobs. Now, when it comes to Power BI, it has superior capabilities. And it's, again, as I previously stated, it really is meant to integrate with the Office platform, but also other Microsoft solutions such as Dynamics or SQL. Now, when it comes to business intelligence, this is a term that sometimes gets confused between, for example, business analytics or data analytics or data engineering or any other type of data science related kind of career field or specialization. But basically, business intelligence is really meant to look at your business data and try to derive value from that data. So with Power BI, this is a cloud-based business analytics tool, basically, that is going to help you perform everything from data acquisition to transformation to data modeling to even visualization as well. And it does it really efficiently. Now, also too, from an enterprise perspective, and again, I'm not sure of everybody's experience, but when I say enterprise, I just like to be clear on what I mean by enterprise. Enterprise is typically going to be any organization that typically has a large, basically, presence in the form of employees, but also market cap. And basically, again, every organization could be, either or both, or, they could be anything from 1,000 employees to having basically 100 million, 500 million in revenue or more, even a billion. Anything under that is, generally going to be considered, a little bit smaller enterprise. The sweet spot for, I think, business intelligence using Power BI is really that it fits into even the small and mid-tier markets as well. So we see a lot of what I would call variations in target, professionals. Like with Tableau, for example, which is a competitive product, that's really meant for the enterprise. It's a very expensive suite of licenses required to really do anything with it. And I'll talk about the licensing with Power BI as well here coming up. But basically with Power BI, it's also just relatively easy for even the uneducated user to figure out what to do. Now, when it comes to, for example, I assume a lot of you may be either in the IT business or want to get in the IT business. You're thinking about data science or data analytics. Business intelligence is still in that area. But basically, let's say data scientist, one of the things about a data scientist is that you're going to want to look at the data, try to understand the data, and try to derive value for your data, for your enterprise. So basically, that data could be anything that is acquired. So for example, maybe you want to take the Microsoft Dynamics data and try to put together some graphs, some charts to visualize what exactly is going on from a perspective of our business. And that could be a really good way to get started. So what is your next opportunity? Well, basically, one of the best things to really think about here is that when it comes to Power BI, this can really help you basically play a significant role into deciding what markets that your enterprise invests in. And what I mean is, when it comes to looking at data, let's say we have a challenge. You get called in. Let's say you're the business analyst and you get called in to your executive's office, whoever it is, a he or a she, a CEO or a CTO or CFO, whoever. And they basically say, let's say, Joe, we need you to help us understand, for example, in our web commerce platform, why is it that people are viewing the products all the time, but they're not buying the products? Can you help us look into this? This is a good example of what you could do with Power BI. Another thing that you could look at, for example, is to take, for example, your cloud spending in Microsoft Azure and actually view what department is spending what and put together nice graphs and charts. Even though you could do the same thing in billing in Azure, you could look at things differently and break it down for chargeback, for example. So there's a lot of variations of what we can do. Now, as far as Quick Start, again, I'm sure some of you may be familiar with Quick Start, may not, but basically from a partner perspective, again, a lot of capability around e-learning. And then also online training, live and recorded as well. Now, just a quick note too about Power BI. I have a few more things before I go to the demo. Again, the goal was to walk you through some of the features and functions of Power BI. But basically, again, think about this as a tool that's cloud-based. Now, there's also basically Power BI desktop. So we could go and actually download a copy on our desktop as well. So if we don't want to use a cloud service, we could also do that. Now, there's certainly some things you could do in the cloud or on the desktop that you can't. Again, I'll touch on a few of those when we go to the demo. But again, it's longer conversation that we have time for. But basically, I just wanted to point out that there is a desktop version. So with the Power Platform, now just to clarify, Power BI is really under what's called the Microsoft Power Platform. Well, what is this all about? Well, the Power Platform is really more a combination of tools, and one is Power BI. Another is Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agents. Now, for example, if we want to create virtual agents, these are chatbots, for example. But with that said, let's go ahead and talk more about Power BI here and then go to the demo. Now, as far as licensing, there is a free capability with Power BI. There's up to a 60-day free trial. And it is relatively easy to use. And there's also basically demo data sets available that you could use and play around with pretty much immediately. What's nice about Power BI is that it does have sort of that, what I would call drag and drop feel. And when it comes to drag and drop, basically, again, that is basically where you can take like a graph and basically change it around, or take data and import it into Power BI and basically move it around as needed. Now, there's of course, limitations to everything, and I'll show you a few things in the demo. Okay, now what about the tool sets? Again, we know it's a suite of tools basically. And one of the things about the Power BI suite of tools is that it, again, remember, it's really about you as an enterprise bringing data together. And you'll see, for example, when I go to the demo, how we could go in and actually take a content pack, for example. And a content pack, if you're not familiar with it, is basically going to allow you to have access to data through what your web services generate. So for example, let's say you have an e-commerce site, you go ahead and take this information and import it into basically Power BI. There's basically organizational, and then there's also service related content packs. Now, when it comes to like service content packs, for example, what's nice is that we could take, for example, and a lot of customers, of course, use, for example, Salesforce, and they use Google Analytics. They're also supported as well. So we create a dashboard just for those specific content packs, and then start bringing together that data, display that data, and then provide insight into that data for our business. We could create dashboards. We could also create basically an app as well in a workspace. And therefore, if we don't want to look at 17 different things, we create a workspace just to view one, for example. So the dashboards are really about giving you that 180 to 360 degree view of your basically critical services, critical applications. Now, metrics are available, of course, on all your devices and updated in real time. For example, if you want to use this with your iPad or mobile, you can do that. And it is a single click based type of solution. Now, as far as other features, again, I'll walk you through a lot of this visually, but basically quick insights. This allows you, for example, to use Power BI to search your data sets. It allows you to take, for example, a graph or a chart and visualize these so that they can make sense. Now, for me, I really like graphs. I like charts. I really like looking at them. I don't like to look at a table with just data sitting there. And what's also nice is that with Power BI, you change the colors in a lot of cases. You can also, for example, manipulate meaning, for example, basically the view of how it looks, and it has a lot of great capabilities. There's also APIs. This is a cloud service, of course, so we go ahead and tie everything in. Query editor. Basically, this is going to use the Power BI desktop query language. There is a specific query language for basically Power BI. Now, if you're familiar with SQL, for example, there's some capabilities that are similar. But basically, like with Power BI, for example, with SQL, there is a tool that is called SQL Server Reporting Services. This is also pretty much similarly in the sense that it allows you to visualize your data. It doesn't wrangle the data. It doesn't like aggregate the data really, but it was a fairly well-known tool. It is an older technology, but the big deal about it is that, again, if you're using SQL, it's not really that powerful now compared to like a lot of other tools. It's a very static type of report as well. Whereas with Power BI, it's really dynamic. When it comes to other features, again, with Power BI embedded, this is going to be a tool we could use with Microsoft Azure. And it allows us to report on our own web and mobile apps. Also, too, visual interactions are supported. This is actually really cool because what it does, and if you're familiar with Tableau, you can do a lot of the same things, but it seems like some things are easier here, of course, depending on, when it comes to like colors and visualization. But basically, you have filtering capabilities, pie charts. This is the default filter behavior. And then you can also basically just choose no filters as well. Now, when it comes to Power BI, you can connect or import data, basically in reports, that is, from 3 types of files. Now, that, of course, has been expanded on depending on if you're going to use desktop or not. But basically, with Microsoft Excel, we have a .pbix file. That is the Power BI desktop file, and then CSV. All right, so how does the workflow of this actually work? Well, basically, we're going to have basically a query service, which is going to basically be a version of SQL essentially. And we're going to use basically what's called a data model. That data model will allow us to go in and create reports basically as well. And then we can publish these reports, for example, into Office 365, which is a cloud service. And then down here, we have our data management gateway. We have our cloud data that's being stored in Azure over here. But this is just one example. Now, this is pretty much the high level workflow. Now, one thing to point out too with Power BI is a couple things I just want to note. So for example, too, on, I think it's this slide here. Yeah, so in the demo, I'll go to this directly, but basically, like, for example, what we could do is I could change the view of this to a pie chart or any other supported table or graph. I could also go over here and share data up here, basically as well. Hopefully you can see that, but I'll show you this in the demo, it's easier. There's also Power BI apps. Some apps are free, some are paid. So let's go to the demo. And let me share my screen. And if there's any questions, feel free to pipe them in as well. All right. I'm going to go ahead and share it now. You should be able to see it. All right, that looks like it should be good. All right. So basically, this is the Power BI homepage. Basically, it's app.powerbi.com. This is the cloud service. Now, there's also the desktop version as well that is available for those that are interested. And I just wanted to point out, for example, if you want to download it, you'll need to make sure you have enough space. There is the ability as well. I would review over here. This would be where you would download. System requirements are here. Now, the challenge is you really need to have basically at least Windows 2010. It doesn't really work too well on 7, at least from my experience. Also, it does use Internet Explorer, and it supports Chrome pretty poorly. So just be aware of that as well. Instructions are fairly straightforward as well. This is the version name. And this is, again, this is a application that we could use locally. Now, what is really supported on desktop versus like the cloud service? Basically, you do just about everything on either or. It's just that the desktop does support, for example, third-party apps better. So what you need to do typically is bring it into Power BI desktop and then export it over to the cloud if that's what you might have to do. Again, every use case might be a little different. Now, let's go to the dashboard. When it comes to Power BI, the first time you log in, it's going to be pretty much an empty dashboard. Now, what we typically would want to do before we do anything is create some kind of a workspace. Now, a workspace is going to be a view. So basically, we could think of a workspace like this. And let's say, for example, here, this is my Power BI. What I want to do is use Power BI for different scenarios. And I have a single view, for example, like a service. It could also be used, for example, let's say I want to use it for e-commerce. Oops, keyboard slipping here. Just say e-com. And again, I could also use this for basically, let's say, have departmental views as well. These are just some of the things we could do with this. So that's just the way to look at it. So this is our basically Power BI account basically here. Maybe minimize or expand that. And effectively that is pretty much how you want to think of a dashboard. So let's talk about, so over here I have my workspace. So what I did is I created 2 workspaces. One is for YouTube analytics and one is for COVID-19 tracking. Now, what we could do over here is, let's say, for example, you want to go to an app. And remember, the dashboard could have multiple apps in it, or it could have one. It's really up to you. I could go over here to App Source and go and download additional apps that I could use as like test data, as something that I could use to play against, for example. Now, I could also use this, for example, from everything from LinkedIn data to sales data with Dynamics to mail to any number of use cases that you could think of. Someone's probably done it before. It's just a question of, again, what's available and what is supported for what you're trying to do. But basically, there's a lot of good examples. Now, organizational apps, this is actually apps that are created by your enterprise, your organization, that you're using basically. So let's say you're generating Microsoft Dynamics data. You go ahead and filter that into an organizational app, and this is going to be shared among other business intelligence users. That's a really nice feature because you could give everybody, for example, different accounts, but they get the same view when it comes from an organizational perspective. So that's a nice feature from an organized perspective. Now the templates are here. Now let's say in this scenario here, I want to go look at LinkedIn. Now this is sample data. So what this is going to do is just go ahead and download some sales data from LinkedIn. What this is going to do is install another application. And then what we'll do is we'll dive into one of these and then talk more about it. So give that a second. I need to go grab my water here over here. 1 second. Okay, so that looks like it's done. And now basically what we just did, just to clarify, this is just sample data. Now, if you want to grab your own data, I'll walk you through that in a second as well. For example, what we could do is go over here, let's say to COVID-19 tracking. So basically I can go ahead and connect data, explore the app as well. And this will bring up basically all the sample data and basically just make that available. Now I could also, for example, let's say, just as an example, I've downloaded some additional COVID-19 data. I could go over here to connect my data and basically put in the URL and basically download it as well. And I could set that off as either public, private, or organizational. And then you would just sign in basically to that site. Now, again, I don't have an account on that site, but if you did, that's pretty much what would occur. And in your companies, what you want to typically do is create sort of like a portal in a lot of cases for your aggregated data so that your Power BI users can, of course, grab it and get it whenever they need. That's just an example of what you could do with this. All right, now what we could do is you can see that I could highlight the data. I could also change, for example, let's just change this to, let's say about a month. You can see there that just by changing that little drag button or drag slider button, whatever you might want to call it, that this changes this data automatically. And when I go to Georgia, it highlights Georgia, and then it'll tell me the number of daily cases and the number of daily deaths as well. And you can see that there weren't really any, at least until, probably about the, I don't know, it looks like the 10th maybe or so. It says what, the 12th actually. And again, you can see just, it's easy enough to drill into this. Then I go over here to reset this to default if I want, so that if I mess up my view or there's something I forget to do, you just simply reset it. Now, over here, we have some icons. So I could copy the visual as an image, copy it to clipboard, and basically that's in my clipboard now. So if I go over here to Word, if I can find Word, there it is, and create a new document. And there it is, see, and it's already right there. And they also hot links it as well. So that what happens is that if you give a report, for example, to your executives, they could just simply view it in a PDF and click or whatever, follow it to wherever you have the report. Now, bookmarks as well, I could also subscribe. So what I could do is create a subscription for all my users, my stakeholders that are interested in this data. So very interesting approach. You go over here to manage all subscriptions. If you had any, they would be here. And again, you could simply set them up as well if needed. All right, now let's go back to home. So that's COVID-19. Let's go look at the, let's see here, LinkedIn Workspace. So let's go ahead and go into that. Now you can see the visualization of this. Now, what's really nice is, again, I could just go over any of this and it tells me all the information I want. What this is doing is it's showing me, let's say, Sales Navigator. So Sales Navigator is again, going to be for sales teams using LinkedIn for whatever reason. But basically, for example, that's based on leads. It's based on profile views, connections, in-mails. So in-mails are basically LinkedIn mails that you get from, anything from recruiters to sales folks to other connections or whatever. Now, I could also go over here if there was any notifications, it would show me. Now, when it comes to the data, I go over here and select show as a table. And you can see there that it took this graph and just saved it as a table. I go back over here. I could include, exclude, or analyze. I could say explain the decrease. Now, what this is going to do is if there's insight, now this depends on what you program and the types of data, but it can also visually give you additional insight. But what it's saying here is that there's a 6.41% decrease in seats between this date and that date. And that's just, one of the many things we could do with this. So let me go back to, let's go back to the tracking report here for COVID-19. Now, what is also nice about the visual is you could certainly change the colors if you want. You could also show it as a table as well. You could drill through. So like county view if you want. And then there you can see it picks up North Dakota, and you highlight each county and it will show you the number of confirmed cases or deaths or whatever is shown in that data. Now, one of the things we could do is, let's say we've ingested this data, we've formatted the data, we've wrangled it around, played with it, whatever we want to do. I could go over here and click download, and this will download this for my desktop. So if you have the desktop app, you go ahead and take this from the cloud and just play with this locally. Okay, let me show you a few more things. Now, if I go over here, these are filters. So filters will basically change, of course, what is viewed in the data. So if I take out, confirmed cases, that'll take out that data and we'll change the view as well. Now this here and this icon right here, it looks like a sort of like a graph with an angle or arrow or something. It's hard to tell. But basically when you go personalize, I could go over here and personalize this into anything that I would want to change it to. I could also change the location. I go over here to add a new field if I want. I could change basically the saturation colors. I could remove that field, for example. So let's say here, instead of fatality rate, let's remove that. And now that'll be gone from that particular picture. And you can see there that, again, that's there, but it's not in this data. So let's go ahead and show that as a table. Okay, confirmed cases and total deaths, and of course, of the fatality or whatever that basically viewpoint that I took out is gone. So that data point. Now, again, I go over here and just look at, let's say Texas. And that showed at the time that there was 4,273 confirmed cases, 64 deaths. And again, I go back over here and highlight this, drill into that as well, highlight that. And then what I could do is go back over here, drill through, let's say in Texas over here, county view. And now you can see here that it looks like really those deaths were really relegated to only a few counties like Dallas area, Houston, and Austin, and then San Antonio. So pretty much the major centers. It looked like El Paso wasn't even on the list, really. Anyway, so that's just, again, something else you could do. So let's go reset that back to default. Now, a few things we could do. I could expand this to basically full screen mode. I go over to settings, and this is where I could create what's called a content pack. So a content pack, if you remember that, when I go to create content pack, this is basically, for example, I create an application or a service that I want to use. So I go over here and I put in, let's say, an email. Oops. So say that. And I'm going to call this the COVID employees. And yes, trust me, there's large companies tracking their employees this way. let's call it COVID employees. And I'll say this is a test for COVID employees. I could go over here and now I could upload an image actually, and it's really hard to see that icon. The challenge with the images, they're really, really small, and you'll need to make it like under 40K, which is like really small. So you can see there, it really wants a smaller file. So just as an example, I'm just showing you, but I'll just, again, continue on. Go ahead and reload that. This is the weird part. Okay, let's clear that. And then I could go and add this to the gallery if I want as well. Now, one thing to point out is I could add this to specific groups or the entire organization. Now, when you select, for example, an image, you could add like a company logo as well. That's probably the main use case. And then if I had dashboards that were already published or reports, it would pick them up and I could select them as well. Now, again, I'm pretty sure I don't have any small enough images anyways, probably, but I'd have to dig around. But I just want to show you what you could do with it anyways. So that's just one. Remember, 40K is like pretty much black and white. All right. So that's just one thing you do with this. All right, now, a couple of things. You have a happy face up here. And let me shut off my email. Sorry about that. Okay, the happy face, I could go get community feedback. So I could submit an idea. And this will bring me over to BI Ideas. So this is a way that you could interface with Microsoft, the Microsoft team on Power BI, to add more capabilities and features. Now, the other part of this is I could go submit an issue. So if there's like a bug or something's not working right, I could go ahead and submit an issue. All right, now favorites. So what you could do is select basically an application and add it to favorites. I'll just show you here. So for example, I could go over here, see that star, mark it as a favorite, and always refer to that again. This is recent history. Now apps, that'll bring me back over here. Now shared with me. So these are the applications that are shared with me. Now in an enterprise, what's probably going to happen is that you'll have basically tied to, now the way you want to really set up permissions and all that for this is to have your Outlook or your Office 365 administrators basically assign you permissions as a user, and then whoever is the administrator for the application will push it out to you as a user generally. So you might have basically a human resource app, or you might have an e-commerce app. You may very well have, for example, data about genetics if you're a biofarm company or whatever your your data requirements are. Again, a lot of flexibility here. Now, learning is where you go and get training on this from basically the community, documentation, or over here is basically videos and also a combination of videos and basically instructions that are available. Now, if I go back to workspaces, these are the workspaces as well. And I'd go create a new workspace. I'm going to call this Enterprise Apps. I'm going to say this is for COVID checks. Then I go to Advanced. I could go ahead and assign this to specific users, or I could just have it as a workspace admin as well. Now, I could also tie this to the Microsoft OneDrive as well. And then dedicated capacity. So this is where, again, this is where you want to start paying attention, especially when you have apps that ingest a lot of data. Like we're talking basically, gigabytes isn't a big deal, but when you start getting into terabytes of data, that stuff can really cost you some significant money. And also, if you don't, be careful with how you basically format that data to be basically analyzed, that could slow down your basically your data digging and your data viewing for that matter. You can develop a template around this if you want. So that template is you create the same template and then have your other users as well use this for future use. So I could turn that on and off. Now for this to work though, is the OneDrive needs to be basically selected and set up. I'm not using OneDrive, so it's not even going to show up. And then what you could do is just save this. And now that'll go ahead and basically have that workspace available. And again, that's just another view. All right, so this is Enterprise Apps is right here. So if I select that, there's no apps in it yet. So I could go over here to create basically a data set or a report. So if I go to create a data set, I need to go find the content that I want to create the data from, of course. So I go over here, get from databases. So I could go ahead and select my database like Azure if I'm using Azure SQL. Or I could use SQL Server. Now, I think I just talked about SQL Server analysis services. This is basically, again, this is an older visualization tool. So what Microsoft has done for those users that are commonly using SSRS, you go ahead and take the data that's been created there, basically in that tool, and just bring it into here. Now, also supported, which is actually really an enterprise use case, is Spark. So with Spark, for example, I could go ahead and take basically my open source Hadoop, and this fills into Hadoop as well, where I go ahead and generate and bring together all this data and use Apache Spark-based services as part of this. So this is pretty exciting to see this. So you could use this on Azure HD Insight, for example. Now this is only supported, one thing, that's only supported on the desktop. And that's one of the features that I was hinting at is only supported on desktop. Now, if I go to SQL Server, this same thing, publish data sets. I go to publish data sets here, and I could select one of these. And you can see there, okay, oh, I have to connect, I didn't connect it, silly me. But anyways, I go over here and just change this to come out as a pie chart or any other table or graph that I so choose. So just so many cool things to do with this. One of the things to point out with this though is you definitely want to plan this, ahead of time. So for example, first thing you want to do, identify your users. Second, identify the applications that you're going to use Power BI for. The third thing you probably want to do is see what other features and functions you want to use with this. For example, you may want to use Google Analytics, you may want to use Salesforce, you may want to use SQL Server, whatever that is, get that ready to go. Now, I want to talk about security briefly with this. So we want to think about Power BI as basically, as a way we could use what's called row level security. That's known as RLS. And let me get water here, sorry. Okay, so that's known as RLS, that is row level security. And what we could do is filter that to restrict data to specific users by row and table, by row, I should say. And what we could do is define these filters within roles. So for example, we're going to have a data owner, we're going to have a data user basically, and we need to give certain permissions to the owner and certain permissions to the user, for example. So with that said, there's just so many things to think about. Now, what about the databases you want to connect to? So again, we get import basically from the desktop, and that's probably the easiest. So for example, with import, one of the things we could do is basically choose the import, connect it to the database, load that information, store it basically in a data model, and then we could go ahead and connect that from there. Now, after we publish on the BI desktop, for example, we could publish directly to the service. Now, one of the things we want to think about is the enterprise really should have basically what's called an enterprise gateway. The enterprise gateway acts as like a bridge between your cloud services and your on-prem server. So this is really part of what's called an Azure Service Bus. So if you want to use that in a sort of, a cloud-based approach, that's really sort of, I think, the best approach for that perspective. Now down here, we have additional videos. They have guided learning, tutorials as well down here. How to get data from files. This is probably one of the first ones you want to use. For example, what do you do to get it from Excel, OneDrive, etc. But anyways, for time purposes, we're running about out of time. I did want to leave a minute or two for questions. Any questions? Anything else I could answer? No questions? Okay. Well, I wanted to thank everybody that joined, and I hope there was a few new things you learned. And definitely keep in touch with Quick Start. We always have additional events around different subjects as well. All right, thank you. If there's no other questions, going once, going twice.
Thank you, Joseph.
Yes.
That was a great session, and thank you everyone else for joining. We have just launched a poll. If you could please take a moment and submit your answers, we would really appreciate that, and that will also help us improve our webinars and really serve you better. And if you have any questions about the webinar, you can share it now on chat. And we have one already, Joseph, and that is what data sources can Power BI connect to?
Yes, yeah, good question. So we can connect, for example, I'll show you here. Now, remember, it's different between desktop and Power BI. So if we want to connect to data sources, for example, from Salesforce or anything, we want to do that from desktop. However, if, for example, I want to, let's say, go over here, what we could do is, again, I could go ahead and connect this, for example, to other services and other types of data. So for example, what are the types of databases or data services, for example? Is that the question? Or data sources, was it? So data source, I just want to clarify. So a source of data could be, for example, SQL Server. It could also be basically from like Office 365, anything Microsoft. So those are the main ones supported in the cloud. Also Dynamics as well. But if I want to like connect, for example, like third parties like Salesforce, I want to use the desktop and then ingest it into here. So if I go over here, connect data, this is a video on that, and it'll walk you through basically how to do that. Okay. And then also too, I didn't show this to you, one quick thing you can see there, I could also embed links, export this as PowerPoint or PDF as well. So with that said, I hope that answered your question. Anything else? And then lastly over here, I didn't cover this as well, we have Data Gateway. We also have a report builder, Power BI for mobile, and then I can also bring in Excel updates as well. And then this is the link for the desktop again. All right, So the data sources, again, we could, basically in the cloud versus the desktop will vary. So, all right, great. Thank you for the question, whoever that may be. All right. Anything else? Looks like, okay, Nathan. Okay, yes, thanks for the question, Nathan. All right, thank you everyone for joining.
All right. Thank you, everyone.